There's a moment you probably know well. Your cat settles against you, maybe on your chest, maybe curled beside your leg, and that sound begins. Low, rhythmic, steady as breathing. You feel it before you fully hear it. And something in you relaxes almost automatically because you think you know exactly what it means. But here's what's quietly true, and what very few cat owners ever get told. That sound you've been hearing your whole life isn't one thing. It's several, and one of them, the one researchers find most remarkable, your cat may only make for you. If you've ever sat with a purring cat and wondered what was really happening in that moment, not just the biology, but what she's actually communicating, this video was made for you. Subscribe if you want to keep understanding her more deeply. And stay with this, because what's coming will change how you hear every purr from this point forward. Think about the last time your cat purred near you. Not at the food bowl, not in a carrier on the way to the vet. Just near you, in one of those unhurried moments when the house was quiet and she chose to be close. There's a particular quality to that sound that's hard to put into words. It's not just noise, it has texture, weight. It moves through you in a way that feels almost deliberate. Most people receive that sensation and file it under one simple label: she's happy. And that's true sometimes, but it's only the beginning of the story. Here's the thing about purring that makes it genuinely unusual, even among animal vocalizations. It doesn't belong to one emotional state. It isn't the cat equivalent of a smile or a wag or a single clear signal. Feline behaviorists who've spent years studying domestic cat communication have documented multiple acoustically distinct purr patterns, sounds that are physically different from one another in frequency, rhythm, and the way they're produced, each surfacing in response to entirely different internal conditions. Your cat isn't making the same sound in different situations. She's making different sounds that you've been hearing as one. That idea takes a moment to settle, because the purr feels so singular, so consistent. It's the most familiar sound in your home, possibly the most familiar sound in your life if you've grown up with cats, and yet, it carries a vocabulary most owners have never been given access to. That's not a failure on your part. It's just that this layer of feline communication rarely gets the attention it deserves. People talk about tail language, about slow blinks, about the way a cat's ears swivel when she's uncertain. The purr gets simplified, reduced, and in that reduction, so much meaning quietly goes unheard. What feline behavioral research has begun to reveal is that the purr functions less like a single word and more like a tonal language, where the same basic sound, shifted in pitch or rhythm or urgency, carries an entirely different meaning. Some of these purrs you've almost certainly felt without recognizing them as distinct. There's one that happens when your cat is completely alone and simply content. There's one that surfaces specifically when she's pressed against you, actively seeking contact. There's one that emerges when she's uncertain or overwhelmed. And then there's one, the most remarkable one, that researchers believe cats developed in direct relationship with humans. That one we'll come to. But first, it matters to understand why cats purr at all. The casual explanation that purring signals happiness has been the default for decades. It's not wrong, exactly. Contentment is absolutely one context in which cats purr, but it became the only story people told, and that narrowed understanding calcified into assumption. The truth is that purring is a far more versatile and layered behavior than simple emotional expression. It appears to serve different functions depending on context, sometimes communicative, sometimes self-regulating, sometimes directed outward with clear relational intent. Understanding those differences doesn't make the purr less magical. It makes it more meaningful, because it means your cat is doing far more than you realized in those quiet moments together. One of the most striking things about the purr, and something that tends to catch people off guard when they first encounter it, is how rarely domestic cats purr at other cats the way they purr at their humans. Feline behaviorists have observed that adult cats living together typically communicate through posture, scent, chirping, and vocalizations that have very little overlap with the kind of sustained purring most cat owners know intimately. The purr, in its fullest expression, is something cats appear to direct most often toward their human companions. That means the sound you hear when your cat settles against you isn't just a cat thing, it's a you thing. And that distinction matters enormously. This video isn't going to tell you that you've misread your cat. That framing would miss the point entirely. What's actually true is that you've been right. You've always sensed the meaning in that sound, always felt that it carried something real. What's happening here is an expansion, not a correction. You're going to finish this understanding more of what's already between you and your cat, not less. The purr you've loved and leaned into is exactly as meaningful as it felt. There's simply more of it than you knew. More texture, more intention, more of her in it than even you realized. So before we go any deeper, consider this for a moment. Your cat has been purring in your presence, possibly for years. Every time she did, something in that sound was calibrated, shaped by her physiology, yes, but also by the specific emotional states in and by who she was with, by you. The sound has always carried information. The only thing that's been missing is the ability to read it. And that's exactly what's about to change. Because to understand what each variation of the purr is really doing, We need to start with what's actually happening inside her body when she makes it, and the answer is more fascinating than most people expect. He purr begins deep in her throat, not in her lungs, not the way a human hum vibrates through the chest, but in a rapid, rhythmic firing of the muscles surrounding her larynx. Those muscles contract and release dozens of times per second, and as they do, they interrupt the airflow moving through her voice box on both the inhale and the exhale. That's the detail that surprises most people. Your cat isn't just purring when she breathes out. She's purring continuously, in and out, without interruption, which is why the sound feels so unbroken, so steady, so almost trance-like when you're close to her. It's a loop, a sustained, living rhythm that her body maintains almost effortlessly. That continuity is part of why the purr feels so calming to the humans who receive it. There's something in the unbroken rhythm, in the fact that it doesn't pause, doesn't spike, doesn't falter, that registers as safety at a level beneath conscious thought. You don't decide to relax when your cat purrs near you, you simply do. And what's quietly remarkable is that the frequencies involved may have something to do with that response. Domestic cat purrs typically fall within the 25 to 150 Hz range, and researchers have noted, carefully without overstatement, that this range overlaps with frequencies studied in therapeutic vibration research related to tissue and bone recovery. Whether cats derive physical benefit from their own purring remains an open question, but the overlap is not nothing. It's worth sitting with. Now here is where the real listening begins. Because within that 25 to 150 Hz range, there isn't just one purr. There are variations in pitch, in evenness, in the subtle architecture of the sound that correspond to very different emotional and relational states. The first and most familiar is what feline behaviorists sometimes describe as the contentment purr. It's low, even, rhythmically consistent, almost metronomic. You've heard it hundreds of times, your cat alone on a sun-warmed cushion, or half asleep in a patch of afternoon light, producing that deep, undemanding hum. This is the purr of pure physical ease. No agenda, no audience required, just a body that is warm and safe and still. But here's the thread to hold on to. That contentment purr, the one born purely from physical comfort, is something your cat often produces when she's entirely alone. When she brings that same low, even hum to you, when she seeks you out and settles against you and begins that steady rhythm in your presence, something has shifted. She isn't just comfortable. She's choosing to be comfortable with you. That distinction is subtle, but it's real. The purr might sound similar on the surface. Underneath, it's doing something different, something relational rather than simply physical. And once you start listening for that difference, you begin to hear it. Then there's a second variation, distinct enough that many cat owners have felt it without having words for it. It tends to run slightly higher than the baseline contentment purr, and it almost always arrives alongside some form of physical contact. Kneading, bunting, that gentle press of her head against your hand or your chin, the slow blink. Feline behaviorists describe this as the contact purr, and the name captures it precisely. This isn't your cat simply at rest. This is your cat actively present, acknowledging you, reaching towards you in the most sustained way her body knows how. The contact purr is a purr of recognition. It says, I know you're here and being here with you is what I want right now. And this is the part that tends to reframe everything, there is a third variation that has nothing to do with contentment or connection. It has to do with uncertainty. Cats also purr when they're anxious, when they're in pain, when something in their environment feels overwhelming or out of their control. You may have heard this at the veterinarian's office. Your cat pressed low in the carrier, purring steadily, even in the midst of obvious distress. For years, this confused people. If purring means happiness, why does a frightened cat purr? The answer is that the purr isn't only an expression of emotion outward. It's also something a cat does inward, a way of steadying herself when the world feels uncertain. Think of it the way a person might hum quietly under stress, not to signal anyone, but to self-regulate, to create a small island of rhythm in the middle of chaos. That's part of what the purr does for a cat in difficult moments. It's an internal steadying mechanism. And understanding that doesn't make the purr less special, it makes it more intelligent. But here's the part that matters for you specifically. When your cat chooses to stress purr in your presence rather than retreating somewhere alone, that isn't incidental. Feline attachment research suggests that cats with secure bonds to their humans are more likely to self-soothe near those humans than to withdraw. Her staying close when she's afraid isn't helplessness, it's trust. So the purr is already doing more than most people realize. It's expressing contentment, it's signaling active connection, it's regulating emotion in moments of strain. Three different functions, three different internal states, threaded through a sound most people compress into one simple meaning. But there's still one variation we haven't reached, and it stands apart from everything else, not because it's louder or more dramatic, but because of who it's made for. Researchers who study feline communication have documented a purr type that doesn't appear to exist in cat-to-cat interaction, a purr that cats seem to produce almost exclusively in the presence of their humans. What that purr is and what it reveals about how your cat sees you is where this goes next. There is a moment, and you may recognize it when it's described, where your cat's purr shifts into something that feels different. Not louder, exactly. Not more intense any way you could easily point to, but something in it presses, it reaches. It has a quality that's harder to ignore than the quiet background hum of contentment, and you find yourself responding to it almost before you've registered that you heard it. You might have chalked that up to your own sensitivity to her, your attunement to her rhythms. And that attunement is real. But the reason that particular purr pulls at you so reliably isn't only about how well you know her. It's about what that purr was shaped to do. Feline behavioral researchers have identified a acoustically distinct purr type that operates differently from the variations we've already explored. It's been documented and studied in the context of cat-human communication, and what makes it remarkable is its structure. Embedded within the familiar low frequency of a normal purr is a second element, a higher-pitched, cry-like tone that rides inside the broader sound. Most people can't consciously separate these two layers when they hear them, but the brain processes them anyway. That higher embedded frequency activates something in human perception that bypasses reasoning entirely. You don't analyze it, you simply feel an urge to respond, to look, to move toward her, to ask what she needs. The pull is immediate, and it is not accidental. That higher frequency sits within a range that the human nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to, a range that overlaps researchers have noted with the acoustic profile of an infant's cry. The effect on human listeners is measurably similar. A rise in attention, an instinctive pull toward the source, an urgency that isn't quite anxiety but isn't quite neutral either. Something in you simply responds. And what behavioral research suggests is that this didn't happen overnight. Cats have lived alongside humans for thousands of years. Over that span, the cats whose vocalizations triggered faster, more attentive human responses, cats whose purrs made their person look up, lean in, engage, were the cats whose needs got met most reliably. Not through any conscious intention, through the slow, patient logic of proximity and relationship over time now. There will be a thought that arrives here for some people, and it's worth addressing it directly and honestly. Does this mean she's just manipulating me? It's a reasonable thing to wonder. But consider what the word manipulation actually implies: calculation, deception, the deliberate exploitation of someone's trust for purely selfish ends. That's not what this is. What this is communication. Your cat developed a signal that reliably generates a response from you, and you developed a sensitivity that reliably receives it. That's not one party exploiting another. That's two beings across a vast difference in species finding a shared language. Every close relationship has its calls and its responses. This is simply one of theirs, built not from scheming but from years of living together, close enough to learn each other. And here is where the detail that changes everything enters quietly. This purr, the one with the embedded frequency, the one that reaches past your reasoning and lands somewhere older and more instinctive, does not appear to be something cats use with other cats. Feline behaviorists observing cat-to-cat interaction have not documented it in the same way it surfaces in cat-to-human contexts. Adult cats communicating with each other rely on posture, on scent, on a range of vocalizations that serve their shared feline world. This particular purr lives in a different register entirely. It lives in the space between your cat and her human, which means, in the most literal sense, that your cat developed a sound that belongs to this relationship, a sound she makes for you. Sit with that for a moment because it deserves the space. Not for other cats, not as some general feature of feline life, but as something that emerged and continues to emerge specifically in the context of the bond between a domestic cat and her chosen human. There is a cultural story about cats that has persisted for a long time. It says they are indifferent, self-contained, that they tolerate human presence when it suits them and feel nothing meaningful in the spaces between. The solicitation purr is one of the quieter but more compelling pieces of evidence against that story. It suggests that cats have not merely adapted to human presence. Some of them have invested in communicating with it, have developed new tools for the relationship. That is not the behavior of an animal that doesn't care. There's one more layer here, and it's the one that will stay with you longest. Cats don't appear to use this purr indiscriminately. Behavioral observations suggest they direct it most toward the humans they are most attached to, the person whose rhythms they know, whose presence registers as safe, whose attention they have learned to trust. Not every human in a cat's life receives it equally. If your cat has ever brought that particular purr to you, that sound with the subtle urgency beneath it, the one that felt like it was asking something rather than simply expressing something, she wasn't just vocalizing into the air. She was reaching toward you specifically. Because in whatever way she maps her world, you occupy a place in it that not everyone does. Think back now. Has there been a moment, maybe early in the morning, maybe in the late quiet of the evening, when your cat's purr felt different? When it had that quality of pressing gently toward you, of not quite letting you remain passive? You probably responded without thinking. You probably reached for her, or spoke to her softly, or simply let your attention settle on her fully. You responded because something in that sound asked you to, and you were always meant to hear it. because that sound, in its patient and unspoken way, has always been one of the most honest things she knows how to offer you. A thread pulled tight between her world and yours, vibrating at a frequency designed, over lifetimes of closeness, to reach you and no one else. What you've heard in her purr was never nothing. It was never simple habit or ambient noise or the feline equivalent of silence. It was language, imperfect, layered, ancient in its way, and directed at you with far more intention than most people ever get to understand. The next time she settles beside you and that rhythm begins, you'll hear it differently now. Not with more analysis, with more fluency. Pay attention to the texture of it. Notice whether it's even and low or whether something inside it reaches. You'll know the difference. You've always been sensitive to her. Now you have the words for what you were already feeling. If someone in your life loves their cat and has ever quietly wondered what she's really saying, share this with them. They deserve to know. And if you want to keep learning her language, one quiet revelation at a time, subscribe. There's so much more of her left to understand.